Council to stand and join me for pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you will, please remain standing and join me in prayer. Lord God, we just thank you for your presence, Lord, always, and we thank you for your presence here tonight. We pray, Lord, that in all that we do tonight, all the actions that we take and the words we speak and the thoughts that we have, Lord, all of those be honorable to you. We pray in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Let's see if we have anybody signed up for public comment.
I'll stand up and out here, shall I
Just one person.
And who would that be?
If you will approach the podium and please state your name and address for the record, please, sir.
I certainly will. My name is William Houston Ruley Jr. I live at 1015 Cuthbertson Road, Waxhaw, North Carolina, Wesley Chapel, Wesley Chapel 28173. And every time I get asked anything on the phone, anything, I have to spell it all out, as I bet you all do too, right? So anyway, but thank you so much for allowing me to come this evening. I really just wanted to have a big thank you to the council, and particularly to the mayor, for looking into and for working with the planner, I understand, about the lighting trespass. And from what I'm hearing, that is a tremendous relief and a tremendous, it's truly a burden off of, particularly Champion Forest. They're the hardest ones hit with that. And so we're very grateful for that. And most people come and go. You never hear a thank you. This is not a thank you job, I know, but thank you for that. And I also have one more thank you. And this is going to, I'm not buttering you up for anything, trust me. But anyway, we've also had at times, only recently in the last 6 months, particularly in the last 3 months, concerns with noise. We already used to road noise. We were used to some school noise from Cuthbertson High School occasionally and whatever, and so we're okay with that. But this has been some unusual noise at different times of day. We had a couple events that, one event where they went to like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and we didn't know quite how to handle that. So thank you, Mike. Commissioner Como was very helpful, and I don't know if you talked to me directly, but I believe you talked with one of the folks in Champion Forest, because I talked with, I believe, Sarah Berlin. You probably talked to a lot of people, and I know the mayor does too. We've had several folks. I think even Ms. Bailey. I'm not sure. You may have had two, David. I don't know, but they give the information. I said, yes, we have an ordinance in place, but this is the process, and we just didn't know. People don't know, so we were able to, when the noise came up, to call. I finally called today, and also did. Who lives on the other side of? I live on one side of Five Stones. If you lives on Mike Termini lives on the other side, and so we were able to call today, and we were able to communicate effectively with the sheriff's department. What are the rules? What are the regulations? What are we going to be doing? And as it turned out, when we called, the noise had occurred last night, this morning. So when it cranked up again this afternoon, I was able to call Officer, I think it's Wickerby, went over there.
Wicker.
It's just Wicker. Just thank you. Add a B to his name. Wicker went over there and said, it's so loud, I am 1,000 feet away. And I couldn't sit on my back porch. My wife, literally this morning when I came home at 10, she said, I was sitting out there, the deer wouldn't come up, nobody would come up. It was so loud, it was just, I couldn't even sit out there, it was just boom, 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 boom. And so I didn't think it just started, it took a while for it to go through my brain. And then Mike experienced the same thing in the afternoon. He got home. And so we called, they went over there and they talked to him. As it turns out, they're calling it a school camp. And so Officer Wicker said, schools are exempt. I said, that's right. That's what I read in the law. Schools, public property, where like a ball field, the government facilities, are exempt from these noise ordinances. And so anyway, so I said, okay. So You won't hear from us this week. So we'll just endure it this week. After that, then we can, let it go from there. So we're not going to try to split hairs with them. So we're learning how to cooperate with that. So we appreciate you taking time with us so that we understand, so we can go in the right direction. But we appreciate the fact that y'all have the noise ordinance in place and that we can work with that. One thing that we do want, just informational-wise, to bring to you, we read through, because it's a lot to read through, it's 89 pages to read through the original CUP, and so we have finally made it through it, and some of the boring stuff are some of these reports. And one of them was a traffic report, and we took it apart, read it bit by bit, and I know that it was done for a specific time frame, but it didn't include a death. Like I was riding a bike, and was run over, literally almost at the entrance to that, to Five Stones. And so I got to research and I thought, well, who's paying for these traffic reports? Well, they're supposed to be independent, but I got to looking at who these companies work for. There are very few companies that do it, and they work a lot for developers. And please keep in mind that this church is run by developers. Kevin Somerville, it works for NVR, is right on the website. He's vice president of this area, and they're out of Philadelphia and New York and all over the place. So it's a huge, huge company. So when you see these traffic reports, I just encourage you to think beyond that. Mike and I have experienced a number of cases that we've looked back up where cars literally flipped over in this same curve, but there was never a highway patrol report. And the thing is that like an ambulance would come, they took people off. There were times that things happened like that. We didn't, we have pictures of them, but we can't find reports of them. So if we can't find it, it's not going to make it into these traffic reports. So just for what it's worth, y'all, it's not just a matter of the S-curve slowing everybody down and Cutlerson Road being clogged. It's just that's a daggone dangerous. And the reason I brought this to you, and I left each one of you one of them, and I encourage you to read it, because this was on a Sunday. So when they start talking about off times, I've heard that so much. They keep going on off times. Well, this was on a Sunday that this happened. So for what it's worth, and I just wanted you to have that. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your patience with me.
Thank you. All right, I think you just signed up.
I've changed my mind.
Okay.
How are you doing?
You didn't miss the deadline.
I wanted to get in there quickly. Thank you.
Name and address.
My name is Mike Termini, 1219 Cuthbertson Road, Waxhaw, North Carolina, 28173. So I apologize for not being here. My kid is a very accomplished softball player, so I'm on tour, and I don't get to come to many of these meetings. But moving forward, I think you'll be seeing more of me. I have a few questions. So the last time I was here, I spoke about the traffic and that curve and the danger of that curve. Have you all given any thought to what I had said that day? Specifically about the curve and the limited sight distance and the amount of traffic out of schools?
Well, we don't own the roads.
I'm not implying you do. I'm just asking you if you've given any thought to what I
We
said.
received repeated complaints about traffic. When you say given consideration, I'm not.
Consideration for the amount of kids that are coming out of school?
We have not considered the school application. And I'll go ahead and tell you that I myself have put a very firm stop on what we considered was the CUP amendment, and we have not been presented anything for the school.
Okay.
So I haven't even discussed it. I haven't seen the application or anything myself. I don't know about other people, but that hasn't been given to us yet.
Anybody else? Seen anything?
No, but I said at the last meeting that I'm not interested in doing anything that's going to increase the traffic flow on that road.
Okay.
So we're not really debating the school application yet because we haven't seen it.
Gotcha. Thank you. What about the traffic study? How far along are we with that?
It's my understanding that the traffic study is complete, but we have not seen it.
Okay, who completed that traffic study?
Design Resource Group out of Charlotte did the traffic study. It's gone through the NCDOT school analysis unit up in Raleigh, because any time a school is getting a driveway permit, they have to. It's all centrally reviewed in Raleigh, and it's been in our. The town has a contract with a traffic engineer, and he had reviewed it previously, and he didn't have any further comments on it after NCDOT had reviewed it. It's been completed, but they do not have a complete application at this time. And so we don't know if they plan to submit an application that says we want to do everything this traffic study indicates. I think that NCDOT is going to insist that they do if it is submitted in the same form. We don't know if they're going to change their application because of the potential cost of the improvements is in the minimum hundreds of thousands of dollars to the road, potentially more. I don't know the cost of everything. I just know that when it's that thick, it gets kind of expensive. So until there's an actual application with capacities, proposed turning movements, other items that are necessary to really evaluate. It's really all speculation at this point as to what they might or might not apply for. They might not go through with the application. I don't know.
Have you seen the traffic study?
Yes.
You have?
There's one thing I want to throw in here at this point is I'm not interested in seeing any traffic studies that were done unless school was in session.
I don't think you get to make that determination.
Yeah, the town.
I'm not going to give it a lot of weight if it's done in the middle of summer when there's no kids.
That's fine.
Which is done during the school year.
Yeah, that's your decision. The NCDOT and the town, we entered into an agreement with the applicant back probably before COVID about the parameters of it, and then it was NCDOT, who's really in charge of things, comes down to brass tacks, has made some adjustments for modeling with COVID considerations, and so NCDOT is, I don't know if happy is the right word. They have my understanding is they have accepted the traffic study as prepared now, after many months of comments and revisions and things like that. How good it is, I don't know. I'm not a traffic engineer, but our engineer has said doesn't have any further comments on it.
And the other thing I want to throw in the loop is, and you may or may not know the information on this. Further down Cuthbertson Road, closer to the Lowe's Hardware Store, which is out of our jurisdiction, which is in Waxhaw's jurisdiction, they're considering adding another subdivision. And one of the conditions of adding that new subdivision is road improvements at Cuthbertson and Newtown and Cuthbertson and Providence Road.
Yep. And so that, I don't think that really made it into the study, but it has been discussed in terms of who's paying for what, where, because I haven't looked, I didn't look at it today, so I'm just going from recollection. I think there are some recommendations about the timing of turn lane improvements at Cuthbertson and Newtown based on the results of the traffic study. Don't quote me, but if my recollection is correct, then there would be Five Stones could be on the hook for some, or this other subdivision could be on the hook for some, and I think it would depend on timing, and I think it's going to be probably pretty complex as to how NCDOT, because it's mostly their baby, how they might apportion those costs and to whom and when. And so there might be a little bit of a staring contest right now, speculating, because of the costs.
Was any of that traffic study added to a prior traffic study in Tucson?
It's a completely new traffic study.
It's a completely new traffic study. Was it site-specific?
It's specific to the existing and proposed uses on the site, because it would encompass both the existing church as well as the church, their future build-out, as well as a new school.
But did they factor in the new subdivisions going in for Wax?
I believe so. They have the model would theoretically account for that.
Just want to make sure that they're looking at all the inputs from all the different areas before they come to a conclusion.
Yeah. So when they're forecasting traffic 20 plus years down the road, essentially when they're looking at levels of service, and so when there's known approved development, they factor that in. But in cases where we have vacant land uses or empty properties, they have a traffic analysis model that they will have an assumption about the future land use of a property. So it's 3 dwelling units per acre, 2 dwelling units per acre, and how much it will generate 20 years from now, and they add that into the traffic on the road.
Just so I'm clear, I'm sorry, just so I'm clear, I know my time's running out, just so I'm clear, it was site-specific. Somebody was on site where the proposed entrance was, or is going to be, and that's in the study?
I do not know how they accomplished their counts. I think with COVID, they probably modeled it because traffic wouldn't have been near as much on Cuthbertson as it would have during normal traffic periods.
Is everybody here aware of the last accident that happened there? Is everybody aware of the last accident that happened there? The board?
Which one?
The one where the car ran off the side of the road, hit the culvert pipe of the driveway next door to mine, flipped over, and landed in the ravine upside down. You're not aware of that? Would you like to see a video of that?
You can
As a matter of
email
fact-
it to us, but
Yeah,
not right now.
okay, no problem. Those are all my questions. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate you.
Want to see more of it?
I will.
All we've seen is the CUP information.
Fantastic.
Until there's a completed application, we won't be given that information. If you want to request copies of stuff that's public information, you're welcome to contact our clerk. She's been very helpful in getting stuff.
Yes.
I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Thank you for coming. Sorry for not happening. So that leads us to additions, deletions, and adoption of our agenda. I have a couple of things. We're going to cross out number 10 and postpone that till August because we haven't been able to get together to review a final meeting. We're also going to cross out number 14 as there are no updates at this time. And I would like to add to the consent agenda to accept Dana Crossman's resignations from the Communications Committee. I would like to add that to the consent agenda. So, David, is there anything you would like to add?
Yes, I'd like to pull out item number E from the consent agenda. I've just got one quick question on that. And then I know we're calling for the public hearing with item G, TA 21-01. How much conversation, how much discussion can we have with that prior to the public hearing?
As much as you like.
Okay.
So we can talk about it during the planner's report.
I was going to say, if we could pull that out and include that in the planner's report, that probably would suffice.
Can we go ahead and call for the public hearing and just make sure we discuss it in the planning?
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to go with that.
Laura, do you have anything? No. Mike?
Cheryl, did we have anything with the, any update on the water bill? Should we add that to the agenda, or can we make that part of your report from the finance office?
You can discuss it in finance. I'm fine with that.
I'm going to add water bill.
Okay, we'll add that to Sharon. And then we'll move E. David down to after the planner's report also.
That's fine.
Motion to accept as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, so now we will entertain a motion to consider approval of our consent agenda with the addition of the resignation from the Communications Committee and our removal of item E.
So motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, and that moves us to our finance officer report.
Okay. So you have the preliminary report for June, and I call it preliminary because it's the end of the fiscal year and there will be a lot of adjustments made and accruals before we have our audited numbers. During the month of June, I made a budget amendment. I moved $195 to Town Hall land maintenance. I took $195 from Town Hall maintenance services. I moved $45 to Park and Rec trash services and took $45 from Park and Rec rentals. I also wanted to ask council if they would write off, we have an invoice that was written to Freedom Farm LLC regarding a floodplain problem and a need for a floodplain development permit. It was back in December. The amount is $424.80, and it doesn't appear that they're going to pay it. I'm not sure what exactly is happening.
We had gotten a call from a neighbor who was concerned about structure in the, we talked about this a little bit before, structure in this creek, 12 Mile Creek, and had asked Bonnie to see somebody, if somebody could go out there and look. I had no idea what we were dealing with, and so they sent somebody out. And we're still dealing with it. But the charge was for our investigation of the issue.
The invoices from who?
We invoiced Freedom Farm LLC back in, when I got the bill from Bonnie's firm, it was February, so it was February 22nd. It's just if it's not going to ever be collected, this is the time to write it off. We could make it effective in June. If you want to, have it collected, then we can go ahead and pursue it.
So this is similar to what we talked about, like with noise or light or whatever, that sometimes we just have to spend money to investigate. If you want it considered that way.
And there was a legitimate issue.
There is a legitimate issue that will be resolved. The owner has been not difficult to work with, difficult to get a hold of. She had been in Texas with her son, who was in the hospital when we first, and it's kind of going on from there. They have, my understanding is they have the resources to fix the problem. So we'll get it fixed.
Joe, one question I had circled on here.
Well, hold on, we can decide about the fourth one.
So is this something as we get through the resolution we could tack on?
I don't know if we haven't. It's not really a fine. I mean, our objective is to resolve the issue, not to necessarily fine them. And I don't know the authority to tax the cost of that portion of the cost of enforcement to them directly. I don't know.
The reason we bill it is because to do what they did, they would need a floodplain development permit, and a floodplain development permit does include engineering fees, and so we've already paid the engineering fees.
And so it may be worth holding on to and then tacking on to. I assume I don't know if she's going to apply for the permit once we get things resolved, because building a compliant structure to get her horses across the creek or tractor across the creek is going to be extremely expensive, I think. I think they have the resources to fix the problem. I'm not sure if they are going to throw money into the creek, essentially, to build a new bridge when they can just ride the horse across.
So is the obstruction still in place?
It is.
So you want to hold on to it?
Probably until we knew that the problem had been fixed or removed.
And yeah, I think we could probably, potentially try and, because I would want, somebody from Bonnie's shop to go down there and verify its proper removal and restoration of the stream. Anybody could probably go look at it, but I wouldn't know till there are other problems that were resulting from their work in the creek. So.
Law educated, okay? As it was, there was nothing that would allow her to move the horses or equipment to the other side of the stream other than walk through that. And it's my understanding that she could have done that, right?
You could ride a horse across the stream at low water there, probably not a lot of problem. I'm not sure what the bank's like though, so it might be an issue of getting back up. To build a bridge, it would probably, since it's in the floodway, it'd probably have to be an actual bridge instead of culverts, because the culverts would be 8 feet tall probably. And so a bridge would probably cost, I don't know, $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 to get it up high enough and wide enough to get above the flood elevation there. So, and it's a relatively small part of the overall property, and so they would probably abandon it versus paying the cost of bridging the stream, if that was the only option.
I'm very glad that we leave the course out until we find out this final
I'm in a similar situation in our homeowners association where the developer wanted to cross a creek. He threw a couple pipes in the creek, covered it with dirt, and the Corps of Engineers said, can't do it. You got to get those pipes out of there. You can build a bridge across it, but you can't just roll some pipes in there and cover it with the creek. And then we ended up spending a bunch of money on both removal and on the bridge. John, any idea what that cost us?
Bridge was $20,000.
Plus the cost of the removal of the pipes and whatnot. But it's fixed now. That's Corps of Engineers got involved. That's how one level it went to.
And this is just one of our many floodplain issues right now, or previously. All right.
Okay. Next thing, we got an invoice for the Urban Forester, $3,781.45, and they're requesting payment by July 30th.
And I remember that council wanted to talk about that before we agreed to sign it. We do think that they have hired someone who's supposed to start at the end of July, right, Cheryl?
I think
So
so.
we heard. So, do y'all want to hold off on it until it's billed? Do you want to sign it?
I don't like paying a bill for services that we're not getting because there's no one sitting in the seat.
Agreed.
But my understanding was if we went forward with something, we needed help, they have
They would reimburse us any cost.
right, that's what I mean. So it's not like we go without service, it's just a different kind of service, so it's not a holdup to us, and we don't really, I think we need to go forward with it, because we don't know what's going forward, that we might need up the next quarter,
But
or whatever the period of time.
the previous person that held that position retired January 1st. We paid through the last 6 months of
Right. But if we needed something, they would have known, we would have still been able to get the service without that additional cost, so we paid the fee. It's my understanding.
I'd still like to kick the can down the road at least another 30 days to see if we fill a position with someone who's qualified to do the job.
Invoices due when, Sharon?
July 30th,
When's our next council meeting?
August 12th. I'm not
Can we
sure,
respond if
14th.
We're
maybe.
not comfortable signing until someone's hired and in place.
Do we pay finance charges?
I don't know what the contract says. I don't know. So do you want me to tell them that or just to not pay it?
I mean, somebody can make a motion.
What's the term of the invoice? What period of time is it good for?
It's July 1st, and it says, please remit payment by July 30th.
For services for which period of time?
For the
Full year?
2021-22 fiscal year.
I motion we don't pay them until we've got somebody in that seat that's qualified.
With the adder that we let them know why, what we're doing?
Unless you'd like to make a separate motion to that effect.
Rescind your motion there.
I rescind my motion.
I'll make a motion that we sit on the invoice until the position is filled, or not, I take that back. That we sit on for another 30 days, but also letting them know why we're doing what we're doing.
And do we want to know that somebody's been hired? Is that part of the motion?
I would feel that not necessarily hired, but at least knowing what's taking place come next council meeting.
Second that.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Okay. We have two things with the park. I don't know, do we want to talk about the fountain and the water outlet now or later?
I think we'll do it in March.
I was going to talk about
Okay. Then I guess we have the water bill.
Cheryl, before we get to the water bill, I had a question on the the budget. Codification services on their operating expenditures, and then also legal fees for the 160D update. We didn't spend any money on legal fees or codification with all the changes that we've made.
Yeah, on the codification, I didn't want to go ahead and codify a few small ordinances when I knew that the big 160D was coming, and I have already sent it to the codification company. I sent it to them last week. So, yeah.
I just thought we had, I guess my timing was off. I thought we did that before the end of the fiscal year.
I felt like it would be a waste of our money to spend a couple of grand when they'd have to just redo it again. So.
Yes, and that was the only question I had on the finance.
The other one was the legal fees. George did not charge us separate amounts for review of the 160D ordinance.
You mean break it out in the...
Yeah. I mean, you didn't. I don't think you had that much time.
Oh gosh, no, I don't
Yeah,
think so.
there was not a thing.
The only reason I asked about it was because it was not spent last. One was 7,000, the other one was 5,000.
I think it had been overestimated by the prior planner.
But didn't we up it in this fiscal year?
Just codification.
No. And just a reminder, we are making, I still get bills in for last year, and in fact, we've, the statement you have, the budget performance shows a net of $42,776, and that's already down to $37,400.
So the water bill was still extremely high.
It was a little higher.
There's got to be a leak somewhere. There's no way that the town hall that has one person here Monday 4 days a week, we're not showering, we're not doing dishes, we're not doing everything in the household. And what was our water bill last month?
What's the amount and the usage?
Okay, I scanned it and sent it to you all. It is not for the water that's used in town hall. It's for the water that's used outside. And I did check with Dwayne again, and there was almost 60,000 gallons used for irrigation. And I double checked with Dwayne, and he forgot to tell his guy, so I double checked with him again, and he has told McGuell to come out and reduce the times to 10 minutes, which is what y'all had wanted. So.
And right now they're set for how long?
I forget now what it was.
15,
It was 15 or 20.
Well, what was the dollar amount of our last water bill? It was
It was very close to $1,000.
for water.
And it's for the irrigation water. It's not for the faucet water.
So if we think there's a leak, how do we find that?
We'll have to hire somebody.
Does anybody walk the lines to see if they found a wet spot?
I asked the landscape people, and they have not noticed one. And he said they really don't do irrigation, so if we need to hire somebody to look for a leak, we're going to have to hire somebody else.
That's a tremendous amount of water, a huge grid.
You can see the meter spinning with the irrigation system off. If you've got a leak, the meter will be going around when there's nothing coming out of the irrigation system. That's how you spot it.
And as dry as it's been, you would eventually have a wet spot. Is that now?
Well, and before the irrigation system got turned back on, the meter was not spinning, so I don't think it is the meter. We had the same thing last year, and we had them check the meter then. Pardon?
There was a leak out here in the front last year, wasn't
I can't remember the whole story.
Did we cut the irrigation system off, Mike, John?
We winterize
In the winter.
Every year.
Okay, but
Yeah.
then we turned it back on. Did we turn it back on just in May? Or was it?
No, like 2 months ago, and that's when the water bill went up. Yeah.
Could be something as simple as a leak way out here by the street where the meter is. But I think $1,000 a month, which is ridiculous. We should spend some money investigating if we have a leak someplace. And it could be as simple as having a guy come out here, landscaper or whatever, and check the system's off and the wheel's still spinning. That's an awful lot of water.
Would you check them? Would you be willing to do that to just turn it off and go check and see if it is spinning?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that hard. I've done it at home.
That would be
I've had
great.
problems with my own irrigation system. So,
Should be an easy calculation. Just all your heads have a certain gallons per minute.
yeah.
Times your minutes, times your days. Probably shouldn't add up to 60,000 gallons. But if whoever put that in, somewhere in the paperwork should say what gallon per minute heads you have and how many. Somewhere on your purchase order. Just count those, count the 15 minutes, 3 days a week, whatever.
I don't think
Should
we
be
have that
gallons.
information.
What's that?
I don't think we have that information.
It wasn't on purchase order when.
No.
So, just something to add in there is the water department at no charge will put a leak meter on your meter and can tell you if you have a slow leak, and that bill would exceed the bill for subdivision, irrigation, 2 entrances, and so on and so forth.
I'd like to get the water company involved and get their recommendation. They're the water experts. And if they've got a way of testing it, let them test it. If they want to bill us for testing it, fine. But $1,000 a month for water is stupid.
So,
if you'll call the water company
Okay.
and tell them that we know that there must be a leak somewhere, but
Mhm.
that just is a way too high number.
Mhm.
What they would recommend is, the procedure they would recommend is follow 6 6.
Okay.
Our grass isn't looking that good to begin with.
It's like filling 3 swimming pools. That's crazy.
Yeah. All right, well, hopefully we can get that taken care of before next.
Thanks, Sharon.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Sharon?
That's all I have.
Any further questions for Cheryl?
Cheryl, let me ask you a couple questions, finance-wise, on
Sure.
Parker Bet, when John comes up to speak about Parks and Rec.
Okay.
That leads us to Parks and Rec if, John, let those come up.
We were unable to have a meeting last month due to lack of quorum, but that doesn't mean I have got some things for you to think about. You know we have an event June the 19th. There's some big positives on that. There wasn't feedback. The event was awesome. It was really well attended. Don't know how many because we didn't have volunteers to count the attendance, but way more attendance than previous summer events. All the feedback was incredibly positive. We raised through the car show $1,125 for Semper Fi.
Say that again, please, John.
$1,125 was raised for Semper Fi.
You should get that information to Deb and let her post it on the their link. That would be good.
She sent me an email with the most recent donations. So there were 60 cars in the car show, which I thought was great. The show was incredible. Some really nice vehicles like Aston Martins and Ferraris. The disappointing thing, though, for me was that we had 60 cars in the car show, making a donation in lieu of a fee. A entry fee was voluntary. There were only 23 donations out of the 60. So an awful lot of people put their car in the car show and didn't make a donation. So we'll think about whether we're going to make it a mandatory fee next time, rather than relying on
The way they
good
can
nature.
confirm, like, hold up their phone and show that they made the donation.
I got a list from Semper Fi who made a donation. So they provided me with a list. So we know who made the donation. Some people were very, very generous. And as I said, only 23 donations for the 60 cars that were in the show. So that was a bit of a disappointment. But other lack of volunteers, again, we really struggle getting volunteers, even though we have a sign up. So we didn't have people to hand out a program which had a QR code for attendance to make a donation. Amanda and I were running around like crazy trying to hand them out. And we didn't have anybody to count the attendance and greet people at the thing. We didn't have people to look after the parking lot, which became an issue.
I did call and apologize and left a message, but I didn't hear back, so I don't know if that means they were really mad or they weren't mad.
So just so the rest of the council understand, Southbrook provided us with a chunk of their parking, but because they had a service, early evening service during the event, they coned off an area that they wanted to reserve for their service attendees. Because we had nobody in the parking lot, and because the deputies refused to go police the parking lot, we had people move the cones and go fill up the parking that Southbrook were reserving for their own service. So Amanda received a complaint. The deputy service was a little bit disappointing in my view. They would not go up to the parking lot and look after the parking lot. They said they're unable to do anything with regard to compliance with the ABC rules. They said, no, that's on you guys, that's on the Rotary. The Rotary has the license, it's up to the Rotary to control people leaving the barriered-in area with a drink. Fortunately, we didn't see any issues like that, but I was just disappointed. They wouldn't put an officer at each entrance. Instead, the 5 officers just stood there and talking all day. We're paying them a lot of money. So.
But they did send that list of feedback too for the next event.
Yeah, I think that was preemptive on what I'm telling you now, because I voiced it to them directly. I told them, no, this we're going to do that.
We even had an issue where we had a gentleman who's starting to get a little bit of Alzheimer's who was lost at the event, and we'd asked them to kind of help find the person. And they're like, yeah, if you have a problem, let us know. So, 3 or 4 of us ran around looking for this person, found him, no problem. But the attitude was just, we don't do that.
The other disappointment was the beverage sales. As you know, in the past, we raised over $600 for the village from beverage sales. This time, it was 141 and change. Now, to me, that is surprising because it was hotter and we had a better selection of beverages and there were more people. So the only thing I can think is it's possibly an unintended consequence of having the event during the day when we got more family attendance than having the event in the evening when we were more adults. So that was disappointing for us, and it was disappointing for the Rotary also.
John, they didn't leave till 7?
Yeah. Last orders were 6. No, last order, they left at 8. The event went till 8.
Well, they stopped serving beer at
7:30. 30 minutes before the end, we called last orders so people can get the final drinking and finish their drink by the end of the event. So, lack of volunteers, not the greatest cooperation from the deputies, disappointing beverage sales. But apart from that, awesome. Everybody loved it, the people feedback was good.
One question on the beverage sales. How much expenditure-wise, how much did we have to spend in order? We don't have to have extra deputies because of alcohol sales?
Yeah, we do have to have extra deputies for it.
So net, we lost money by selling beer and wine.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I will say kudos to John. It was a very nice event.
Thank you.
And it was very well attended.
Not only me, it's the whole committee, it's all the volunteers that did show.
Amy and Cheryl, John, thank you all.
People just wanted to get out. I mean, they were done with COVID. They wanted to be outside without masks.
All right, so a few other things that I want to bring to your attention. Cheryl mentioned them briefly. There's some pond issues. The fountain in the pond that keeps the water moving, stops us getting stagnant water, aerates it for the fish, stops the algae growing, has not been operating since the event. It was turned off for the event, and for reasons that are unknown, it won't turn back on. We had the pond company come out and look at it. They did basically what we'd already done. We checked the electrical supply, the breakers. It's got electrical supply. It's not turning. So they need to pull the fountain out of the pond, and they want to take it back to their shop to look at the motor. I think it being the motor is unlikely because that doesn't make sense. That it was running fine before it was turned off, and it won't run again. I suspect more something's been sucked up into the propeller, and it's just not spinning. Or maybe because if the power was left on but they're not spinning, then we burn out the motor. I think, how much did they want, Cheryl, for the service of pulling it out and doing the diagnostic?
The quote was
A new founding is
$520.
$520 to pull and do the diagnostics. I think when we bought the pump, the founding was $6,200 for the founding we have. I suspect a motor alone, if the rest of the pump is okay, would be less than that, but I got no idea. I can't tell you how much less.
I asked him how much, and he didn't. He said he couldn't tell you.
Until we start pulling into pieces, we don't know, but it's going to cost money to do the diagnostics.
At bare minimum, we have to do the diagnostics of $520, I think.
I went to the park today to see how bad the algae is getting. It's starting, so it's starting to grow in from the edges because you're not moving the water around. The longer you leave it, the worse it's going to get, and eventually it gets where it's a disaster and you got a major issue. So I recommend not delaying any further and getting it addressed. Let's get the fountain fixed.
Cheryl, do we have money in the parks budget for this?
Well, that's what I'm looking at right now.
We didn't budget anything for this specifically.
We budgeted $1,500 for repair services.
Maybe we can pull from there for now.
Right. It's just anything over $500 council has to approve.
And John, this fountain went in when? 2015?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's been in there a while.
Yeah.
I make a motion we spend the 500 or
$520
for the diagnostic.
You could have done it last week if they just took $20 off the
I know.
cost. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
All right. The other pond issue we've got, which I had the same.
What about now? Can we go a step further and say, okay, once they do it, and whether they recommend a new motor or a repair, is there any dollar amount you want to commit to? Or, otherwise we wait until August and...
I'm really hoping they're going to be able to pull the thing to the shore, pull it out of water, pull out a chunk of wood or whatever might be floating in there, and all of a sudden it just starts up again.
That's my hope, but we can't rely on it. If the power had been on for a long time and something was jammed in the impeller and there's juice going to that motor when it ain't spinning, then the motor's toast.
My concern is the way that invoice was written was, it may cost us more than the $520 in time and labor, and I did not sign a blank check for that. I think it's okay, to kind of save money if we want to say not to exceed on a repair of whatever amount council's comfortable with. I can get behind that.
And then what, 1,500 in that budget on?
Mm-hmm.
So, not to exceed repairs up to $1,000?
But, we don't, anything more than that, I think we just come back to council.
But they don't need to know we're going to spend $1,000. They need to tell us how much it is first.
Right.
So, I'll make a second motion that we spend up to the remaining $1,000 in that budget line item for repairs. It's more than that, come back to council. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay.
Thank you. All right. The other issue we've had with the pond, those who've seen it, I think it's about 24-inch diameter galvanized steel tube that goes down. That's the overflow for the pond. That has developed subsurface level holes, and there is water now flowing into the overflow, not coming over the top. So, kind of understandable. Galvanized steel, it's been in there since the 70s. The water is low hardness, low alkalinity, low pH. It's a pretty corrosive water. And we've got some issues with that overflow pipe. We had the same pond company give us an idea of what it would take to repair. They made a proposal, and it was a lot of money. Just over $23,000.
I told John we should just get one of those things you see on the kind of commercial slaps on the fish tank. It seals a hole that big.
Thank you. So before we spend that kind of money, or I even ask you to think about spending that kind of money, I think we need to get Bonnie out. So we've contacted Bonnie. She will bring the professional engineer out and take a look at the situation and make some recommendations for us.
So explain the problem again, John. What's going on?
The big galvanized pipe, right? That's supposed to control the level of the pond by overflow. Below the water level, down here, we've got holes, corrosion. It's rusted out after 40 years of service.
Okay.
It's rusted and we've got water flowing in here.
Okay.
So if we don't get any rain, the level of the pond is going to go like this to where the lowest hole is.
Okay.
Essentially an hole in the pond.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. And, things like the pond being silted up and the galvanized steel being in an anoxic condition underneath all the silt probably isn't helping the situation either. But I certainly don't want to tell you guys we need to spend 23 grand without getting an expert opinion from Bonnie. So there may be a little expense on engineering fee from Bonnie to come and take a look at it. She wasn't available until now. I think next week she's available, so I will schedule a time to go out with Bonnie and take a look and get her thoughts. And what if we just leave it? Is there an alternate we can think about? Is that the only thing we should be doing if we're going to address this issue or not? But just heads up, there's possibly a pretty significant expense related to that pond outflow coming.
I still think we should invest $14 in Flex Seal and just slap a big Flex Seal. All right.
The last thing I wanted to give you a heads up on, there's been a proposal for a flagpole. I've now found, this is by a retired Marine. He's offered to pay for a flagpole, but he needs help installing it because he's rather an elderly gentleman. I have now found an Eagle Scout willing to do the installation for him. It appears he's going to donate the flagpole for the MIA POW, the black flag, and I've asked the Eagle Scout if they could consider raising funds for the North Carolina flagpole and do the install. So I'm going to connect those together on the assumption sometime not too distant future, council is going to say, yeah, we can go ahead with that, but I'm going to get all that ducks in order.
John, we also have to repair the light, the flagpole that's busted.
The what?
The light, shed light.
Yeah. So I think when we're doing the new flagpole install, we'll fix that light and we'll put lights on the other two.
Is there a flag now that's not lit at night?
No, it's a broken fixture. It's lighting it, but
It's just not.
Yeah, just the fixture. Somebody kicked the fixture and it's just kind of
it's wobbled.
And there's two lights, only one I think is busted.
Where do we stand on Parks and Rec submitting the job description for our meeting?
In our submission for the budget, there was a list of duties already in there. I need to add a few things to it, raising and lowering of the flag, take out some of the mowing, blowing things. But you already have a list of the duties.
When's your job?
Next Park and Rec meeting will be the 4th Thursday of July, which is the
26.
The 4th Thursday, July
22nd.
22nd.
Didn't that list, though, include duties for a full-time person?
It did. But there's more for somebody to do than 19 hours. So we're going to have to prioritize from that list of the night. If we've only got 19 hours available, I provided an estimate of.
I think that list, though,
takes this much time.
Yeah.
This takes that much.
That list assumed that we wouldn't have our landscaper, but we kept our landscaper. So
But we need the list because the MAPS group has agreed to help us, or they agreed to help us with the job description, so we just need to get it, so we can get it.
John, the other municipal parks in the county offered up their job descriptions that help you.
Well, I think we're pretty clear on the duties we want the person to perform.
I didn't know that the format was going to be a problem.
We'll format it, 'cause it's gonna match our other ones that we just recently did.
So on the flagpole project, we're still holding until we've got a part-time employee, or can we, since it's so far out in the future, can we say we're going to go ahead with that?
Who's gonna raise the mower and fly?
Part-time employee.
We're nowhere close to hiring them.
And okay, we're not close to doing the project either. It's going to take some time for the Boy Scout to submit his paperwork through the Eagle Scout group, and we were looking at completing it by, what's the one at the end of the year? Is that Veterans Day, the end of the year one? So the target was completion by Veterans Day, and I'm hoping we'll have a part-time employee by Veterans Day.
And won't he have to come to council to present his proposed project department?
Yes, the Eagle Scout will, yeah.
Yeah.
And you've already seen the proposal from the veterans.
Yeah, I was just thinking that now.
He-
I'm just
The
trying-
scout probably can't get his approval until council approves it, I would think.
We better adopt this. All right.
All right, thank you. Anything else?
John, is there any set list yet for the next events at the park?
No, that's on the next agenda is the next events.
And we need to schedule some time to get some roads drawn.
And you know your newest member. so
I know.
there.
And thank Jim for stepping up once you appoint him. Thanks, man.
All right,
Do we
thank
need
you.
to do the Jim appointment?
Yes. So, that's me.
Pardon?
It's just me, right?
Yeah.
You want to stand up, hold your right hand? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. We thank you.
I'm actually not in.
Could Jim take a minute to go up to the podium and talk to us for a minute?
No, sure.
No? Tell us anything you want.
So you
Anything I want?
you just appointed him. Awesome.
Anything you want? No, thank you. I think I told you this. I just moved here, so closed on my house. I live in Courtyards at Wesley Chapel. So we closed 16th of June. So I'm brand new. But I had a great time at the. It was a great event, and I look forward to the next one and you know more like it. I think I told Amanda, where I lived previously, Naperville, Illinois, I was very involved with the council and city government and worked on a lot of committees and projects and development issues and financial issues and things like that. So, and I enjoyed it a lot. So that's kind of why I volunteered. And then the other thing that I volunteered to do was to help you all. I think you mentioned it last week with a longer-term capital improvement plan that not only addresses parks and recs but other areas of the village as well. And I've worked on things like that. Before I retired, I was a CFO for different companies, and so I have a lot of experience in financial analysis and budgeting and things of that nature. So I'm happy to pitch in and help do that as well.
Well, you are officially appointed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much for stepping up. I've got one very important question. Jim from Naperville, are you a Cubs fan or Cardinals fan?
I hate baseball. I never
Always
you
neutral.
know, I hate baseball. It's the most boring game. I don't care.
That's an okay answer.
Yeah.
It's at the Cubs.
We don't have a baseball field.
There you go.
All right. So, thank you. That brings us to our planning board.
All right, good evening. I'm going to go over what we discussed at our last meeting on June 28th. Beginning with, we have Mr. Como and Mrs. Fuller join us, so thank you very much. It was great to have you guys there. You both gave us some good updates. Again, communication from council and planning board back and forth. I think it's really working well. Much appreciated. Old business, we talked about the accessory structure ordinance amendment discussion, right? Actually, it was intended to be a discussion, but we were pretty well happy with what Vaughn presented us. So we went ahead and made a motion to send it off to you guys, and it passed 5-0. You guys have that. The other thing we did was we looked at the rezoning for Central Baptist Church, go from R40 to OI. So good discussions there. Really good information from the applicants. Really good discussion. At the end of it, we voted on 5-0 for it.
When will that come to us?
You said the public hearing for August.
Oh, okay.
And then the last thing we discussed was the TA 2102 amendment to the section, the regulation for the nighttime lighting. So again, good discussion. Actually, we were not unanimous on this. We were 4-1. We were balancing, safety of having lights on at night versus light. What do you call it? Light. Too much light in the areas. I think once we really understood that it was for non-residential. So this does not apply to parks. This does not apply to churches. It's for ordinance we currently have.
The ordinance states commercial industrial properties, so it would not apply to things that are not commercial or industrial.
Exactly.
As currently.
So after reviewing that and just thinking that we don't have any issues in commercial with the current ordinance as it is now. In other words, target parking lot. Pretty much it.
What about expanding the ordinance?
We didn't see a need to. If it wasn't broke, why fix it? So, as the ordinance was set, we voted 4-1 to just leave it alone. I think that's right. I have 11 p.m. on here. I think 11 p.m. is what we have.
Yeah, so there was a fair amount of discussion about it. So at the last council meeting, we brought that up as something that was kind of new to me in the ordinance. And the council had asked that we take this to the planning board for a recommendation on whether to, do something about it or not. So I took that particular section to them. We had a discussion about it, and as John said, the planning board's opinion was that it does not need to be changed. The council can continue, if you'd like to, I wrote a memo about it, if you would like to proceed with a formal consideration of that, since there really wasn't a proposal on the table, we'd be happy to take a formal proposal back to the planning board for a recommendation to amend the ordinance, but that would be up to you, since have discussed it. They do not desire to move forward with it, but you can still make a decision on that.
Well, the complaint we have does not fall under that ordinance anyway.
What was
The current complaint?
The current complaint does not fall within the scope of that.
Can I ask the rest of council, was everyone aware of the noise ordinance not applying to schools? And I know a church is a church and a school is a school. My question is, do we need to relook at the fact that the church has a school in it, or daycare that they're calling school, that we need to look at or readdress?
Well, are we able to legally is probably a good question.
Yeah, I'd have to look up. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
Well, I think that's going to be something we're going to need to think about and maybe have a ready answer.
Well, we can ask George to look into it.
Isn't the ordinance the county nuisance ordinance, which is primarily noise? But I mean, it's a county ordinance, so we can't amend a county ordinance.
So we're not enforcing our ordinance, they're enforcing a county ordinance?
I think so. Is there something else for noise that you can enforce?
There's something in the zoning ordinance, but it would be very difficult to enforce something that's so fleeting as a noise violation. If it was a constant noise going on 24 hours a day, yeah, we could do something through zoning, but if it's sporadic like that, it needs to be enforced via the issuance of a civil citation by, I think it sounds like you have an interlocal agreement for the county for that ordinance to apply within town, the police power ordinance. So
to be clear, when Brandon went out to South Fork Church, he was not enforcing Wesley Chapel ordinance, he was enforcing a county ordinance?
That's anecdotally my understanding.
Okay. I may make some inquiries about that. Just giving you guys a heads up.
But George, will you look into it and see if there's any legal restrictions on noise ordinances?
With respect to schools and churches?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
I think it's important for us to fully understand what we can and cannot affect regarding schools, churches. Because we concentrate on commercial all the time, for details.
Yeah, if the county didn't do a neutral ordinance, and you have chosen, if the village has chosen to have the county's ordinance apply within the corporate limits, then the option would be to adopt your own ordinance and then hope that the sheriff's deputy would enforce it, which they may or may not want to do, or lobby the county commissioners to amend their ordinance to be more expansive.
All right, that's what we had our last meeting. I don't have the agenda for this month.
Yeah, there might. Pending the council potentially sending the lighting ordinance back. We haven't. Other things Bonnie and I sent comments back for the next phase of Heritage, their preliminary plat. So that's underway. They would come to you next, but I don't know when they're going to resubmit. So this would be their fourth submittal. This started back years ago now, apparently. And the only other, Food Lion has submitted plans for renovating the former 201 Central.
You would have found a big glaring sign over that.
It will be a small glaring sign.
They have not formally announced it, so that is only information that's released via here.
Yeah. So they've submitted. A permit's been issued, I would imagine, for their upfit. They have not gotten their sign permit. I've seen the signs proposed. There's conditional zoning on the property, and so there's internally illuminated signs are limited to 5% of the wall area. So they're not going to get a gigantic sign, and that would the signs have not been permitted either. That would be permitted separately from this, and then. Starbucks semi-officially sent something today. They haven't submitted an application, but they have settled on a design for the parcel where Fifth Third was going to go beside Target, and so that's not coming back to either body, but that will be underway sometime soon. But as far as other pending zoning matters or anything like that, there's nothing really nothing new on the table.
No White Castle?
Excuse me?
No White Castle?
No White Castle, unfortunately.
Then there is some misinformation in the community that council can control what goes into these places, and we cannot.
No.
So.
Yeah, I didn't know who was looking at 201 Central until they submitted their plans.
And they've asked us not to broadcast it until the announcement, but now it's public information.
Well, I think they're probably coming.
Cat's out the bag.
Yeah.
And people are going to be upset, but we can't control the merchant that goes in there. There's a list of applicable stores.
Grocery stores are permitted.
And we can't make Whole Foods or Trader Joe's.
There are other grocery stores sniffing around town, though. Not a lot of places for them to go. But I have gotten phone calls even recently.
Are they sniffing specific corners?
Oh, yes, they are.
Does council approach different businesses to
we have one shopping center that doesn't want us to, very clearly.
Solicit.
To some degree, our hands are tied.
I think the big takeaway
tied from a legal perspective?
is understanding what that conditional use permit allowed or did not allow. And because when you do that review and approval, you're essentially signing off on a lot of things that can happen in the future. For example, there's a grocery store there to begin with, and now it's another grocery store. So in that sense, it's kind of like we're back to where we started, just a different one.
And we've almost begged Aston, like begged.
Do the conditional use permits have a sunset date with the business they're approved for?
No, that was the mistake made with Aston specifically, that there was no bill date put in that one. So we can't make them do anything.
And even if they have a build-out date, tenants come and go, and there's limited. If it meets whatever they were approved for, they can switch out whenever they want.
And the general consensus is that some of the widening Weddington Road happens, which got pushed back to 2029 last I heard. They're not interested in doing anything on spec.
Haven't had a lot of new inquiries in the past month or so. I'm not people going on vacation. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of piled up that's in process. I mean, even McCoy Farms, I haven't heard anything out of them, and we've got some stuff, Heritage and Addington's, I guess, finishing out. Homeowner Association turning over.
And there's some drama there too. Part of the neighborhood wants to split. That neighborhood is divided by that rock. Part of the neighborhood doesn't want to be part of the other part of the neighborhood. It's just a lot of drama.
Still waiting on Carolina Pets. They've had comments back from Bonnie and I for well over a month now, and their third submittal. So it's hard to find good engineering help these days.
Any further questions for Vaughn or John?
One question.
We're going to talk about your item.
Yeah. John, on the commercial night lighting amendment, you said that there was a 1-day vote.
Yes.
What was the?
Yes.
I want to ask who. There's a reason. What was
I
the
just have to say for safety. She thought it'd be better to light up, especially commercial parking lots throughout the night, rather than having to turn it off like our current ordinance.
That was
She was in favor of.
I think safety was a recurring theme in the discussion. I know Chuck brought some stuff up about. I think one of the things that I brought up was the council's. I think the council's concern is like, well, it's not really probably not being enforced right now, and so I think that I think we discussed in the planning board that if we want to keep it on the books, it would probably be helpful for us to do some outreach to commercial property owners to inform them of its existence. Because I don't know how long that's been on the books, or whether anybody ever knew about it, or whether they were ever told to do about it. It's not, you don't have to turn all the lights off, but it's the most of them have to be turned off at night. And so if it stays on the books, then we should probably at least try and inform property owners that.
And there are significant issues in the Target parking lot, especially during the summer. Significant teen.
I could only imagine.
So does council need to take action on that? Do we need to let it sit? Do we send it back to planning board for a formal decision, or what do we do with this?
I would just like to focus on our current lighting complaint, because we have not received a light complaint about commercial property. So I would just let it slide.
Didn't we ask our attorney to look into it? Is it action item?
We have to look into the noise.
Oh, the noise, I'm sorry. That's
All right. And then David wanted to just go, thank you, John.
one last thing is you're kicking off the comp plan endeavor tomorrow, is that right?
Next Tuesday,
I'm sorry,
the
next
27th.
Oh,
2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
that's the day after planning.
Tuesday, yeah.
So exciting, very exciting. So hope you've got everyone picked out for that.
We do.
Yeah. So at least myself and planning board are eager to see how that works, eager to see if we need more contribution from the planning board. So I'm eager to see how it goes.
Mayor too.
All right, thank you.
John White actually wants to get up here for RZ 2101. Sure.
No, we're not done yet. David wants to talk about item 15. So you had some questions for Vaughn? Accessory structures.
I thought I did, but let me wait. Let me hold off. I want to go back and review good.
All right. So that leads us to, so no more questions for Molly? So that leads us to continuing the public hearing on RZ 21-01, the request to rezone from R40 to RA40, 21.8 acres at 513 Jim Parker Road. We did not close the public hearing last month because the applicant wasn't present. So, George, do I just say we're just continuing it for this time?
Another continuing?
Opening.
Or you're opening the continued hearing? Yeah. Right.
So does John need to be sworn in if he wants to come? No?
It's all good. So
He wants to be a witness.
well, he was sworn. He was
No. It's a general rezoning. They don't.
Oh, this is general rezoning.
Yeah. You don't need to swear. You're good.
Okay.
I don't know.
Still swear, I'll tell the truth.
Vaughn, do you want to give us a summary of where we are, please, sir?
So at the prior meeting, we introduced the rezoning of this proposed zoning map amendment. It's for 3 parcels at 503 Jim Parker Road. The parcels total 21.8 acres, currently zoned R40, single family residential, proposed zoning RA40. In introducing this last time, we talked some about the surrounding land use, primarily residential in that area. There is some agricultural uses across Jim Parker Road from there. The parcels in question are currently used for a combination of residential, agricultural, and open space, essentially. We talked a little bit about the adopted land use plan, and it labels that area of the village as low density single family residential, which corresponds to both the R40 and the RA40 districts. It doesn't really. The plan doesn't speak a whole lot about agricultural uses, but it does note that the amount of land that used for agricultural purposes has declined significantly in the face of development pressure. That's the primary statement that's made in the land use plan. So from a residential development standpoint, a rezoning to RA40 from R40 would be consistent in general with the plan's primary goal, which is to preserve the village's low-density residential character. Due to the density and dimensional standards for residential development, the RA40 district would remain virtually unchanged. There's some bigger setbacks, but the dwelling units per acre yield would essentially be unchanged for RA40 versus R40. The other thing to point out is with regard, the change from R40 to RA40 would add a significant number of permitted uses. Uses would be either permitted as a use by right or with a conditional use permit on the properties subject to the rezoning petition. Things that we noted in the staff report are as varied as agritourism, indoor animal hospitals, microbreweries, and sawmills, to name a few. That's purposeful in the RA40 district, in that it furthers the stated purpose of the district, which is intended to encourage agricultural uses. And so those are things that are supportive of agricultural use. So the planning board reviewed this at their April meeting, and they did make a positive recommendation to the village council. In making that recommendation, the planning board adopted this following statement of consistency. They stated that the proposed rezoning is consistent with preserving the village's low-density residential character and the district's intent to encourage agricultural use. And so we opened the public hearing last time. I believe we might have had one person come speak at the last meeting. And so it's up to the remainder of the public hearing tonight to hear from the applicant and any other people that would like to speak. And if you'd like to make a decision this evening on it, you will be within your purview to do so.
I know we had a couple of questions too.
Yeah, I had a question, John, about what the setbacks are for the existing buildings.
Oh,
Because
yes.
there's different setback requirements, R40 versus RA40, so I didn't know what your existing setbacks were
Okay.
for your existing buildings.
Gotcha. My house, it's a quarter-mile long driveway. And I placed the house directly in the middle of that 10-acre lot in the back. So I think it's rough, if I recall correctly, close to 500 feet in all directions where the house is. And then I got a barn, which I recently built, And the closest setback would be the side setback, which is 65 feet, which is 5 feet more than the 60 required.
And there's no building on the third parcel. It's
Correct.
It's three.
Correct. No, but yeah, that's just dry.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I have questions. Are there any other questions you guys specifically want?
Yeah, what's the square footage of the building, of the barn?
The barn, it's about 4950.
That's a long question.
All right, so I'm rezoning for pretty much, a lot of reasons. I'm going to kind of group those into two. One is personal. I think one is more, community-based. So personally, my family and I've got 4 kids. We bought the farm to live on the farm, right? I wanted that. So we put our house in the back. We planted orchards and vineyards and raised chickens and, help our neighbors who have horses, and you've seen them here before. So we like we like that lifestyle, I think. That's what I'm trying to raise my kids. But I've been on the planning board for close to 7 years. I've heard a lot of other families in the area talk about, my kids are not going to want to raise crops. They're not going to want to raise, soybeans. I'm looking at my children, it's probably the same thing. So not only do I want to designate my land, for agriculture, but I also wanted to have more opportunities for my kids to do agriculture. Right now it's either keep trying to grow the grapes or keep trying to grow the fruit trees, try and make something of that, or some other opportunity. So that's us personally. And their kids. There's no reason why my kids can't build a house on the property and raise their kids and see how that goes. So the second reason I'm doing it, I think, is for community. So as you know, we've talked about RA40 for quite a while. I see it as an opportunity for Wesley Chapel to help enhance the rural lifestyle that we like. The agriculture, which to me is really the only identity we really have ingrained in Wesley Chapel before it was a village, is the agriculture that was here. When you look around, half the roads are named this farm or that mill or something. So as you think of, I'm probably one of the first people you've seen walk up here who has land that can be developed and says, I don't want to develop into a subdivision. Right? You don't hear from those farmers. You don't hear. I remember hearing from Becky Platt about 6 years ago. She said, our land is our 401k. Our goal is to sell it off to developers. Our kids don't want farming. And I started looking. There's no other opportunities. People with land like myself in Wesley Chapel, we have 2 options. We either just look at it, and the price is just triple in value. Which is why you see properties for sale, $1.5 million, $2 million. Developers are knocking on our doors. So we either look at a very expensive, high-tax piece of property that's not earning us any money at all. We sell it to a developer, or we grow row crops. Nobody's starting to grow row crops. I'm telling you, as a homeowner, we're not going to do that. We're trying to invest, completely, take out all the trees on our property, plant soybeans, a bunch of equipment, to maybe make some money the first 10 years into it. Maybe my kids take over. That's not going to happen. So we need an alternative. If you want subdivisions, then don't do RA40. If you want something different for these people who have land like myself, you got to do something like RA40. So I'm trying to set our place as an example. You've heard me talk about it as a chair, or me here talk about it. I can't go knock on my neighbor's door and say, you should look at RA40, either bring your property compliance or give alternatives, or look at me and I didn't do it myself. So I'm doing it here now first. Then I like to set myself as an example. These other people's properties, you can do something different. All those uses you talk about, right? Greenhouse. It doesn't have to be a monstrous greenhouse. If someone's kid wants to have a greenhouse and grow flowers, year-round, and have it as a business, they can do it under RA40. That makes sense. So if you live next to an RA40 zone, and someone puts in a greenhouse to grow flowers, you should be surprised by that. That's what I heard. When we put in a subdivision, we didn't expect our neighbors to do farming. Even though it was a farm always, it wasn't zoned that way. This is how you specifically call it out. My property was always a farm. My next door neighbors had poultry business, before that was taken out. The neighbors across the street from me have big 18-wheelers and a cattle ranch. That all makes sense on Jim Parker Road. It makes sense in other parts of the village, so I'm hoping to use this as an example as well as benefit my family, and say agriculture makes sense for us. It makes sense for us here in Wesley Chapel. That's why we're here. So that's why we're doing it.
Any questions for John?
No, thank you for sharing your vision
Thank you.
for your property and for your family.
All right.
I have concerns. What you described to me sounds great, as far as what we would hope for the village to provide an alternative for these large parcels of land, to keep that rural nature that we keep talking about and everything else. I agree with you in what you're trying to achieve. My concern is when I read the permitted use table for RA40, there are things on there that, as I'm looking at your property, which, sorry, but you get to become a case study, as the first end is you have 3 different parcels, which we would be rezoning, so in the future you could sell off those parcels individually, they would carry with it this zoning, and because of the size of those parcels, they could do some of these other things that are on the permitted use list. So that's kind of when I started looking at the list, and there's things on that list now that I'm just like, yeah, I don't think so. But there's other things like you mentioned, a nursery, greenhouse. That sounds consistent. You have a vineyard and maybe wine tasting or something. That to me sounds more consistent. The microbrewery seems like out of left field, for example. Because nobody's growing hops out there for even on here. So that's my concern, is the table of uses, that it's opening up for those parcels by this rezoning, or what John's aspirations are for his property.
I was supposed to say, we got large areas of RA40 already. Right, large in Newtown and down by across the street from the school. There's many, all that's RA40 area. And of course, there's no breweries in there, and that even though those are allowed now, they're not doing it. So it's one thing to look at, maybe the table of uses, what's allowed, what's even feasible. Who's going to be putting in?
But it is. It's just that now that this has come before us, and it's like I said last month when we did conservation subdivision, it read well. But then when I saw how McCoy Farms applied it, I was like, I don't think that's how we were expecting, or at least I wasn't expecting all aspects of it. And so I do think sometimes it's to have that actual use case in front of you that it's like, oh, okay, now what would this mean? So that's just where I'm at.
John, to your point, I think it's hugely important to maintain anything that we can do, not only at the village level, but at the property owner level, to encourage agriculture. I mean, if you look at our city, that's one of the 4 closure points. I think that's important. My only concern with any of this is that I agree with Lori. Some of the permitted uses, churches, places of worship, synagogues, temples, community centers, golf courses, miniature golf courses. There's a schools for the school for the arts, schools, sports, instructional. There's a number of items on here that I would be afraid if my neighbor applied for RA40 zoning. And I think I shared this last month when we talked about it. My neighbor could put on a tractor repair business and encroach up to within 40 feet of the rear setback line, and I would be looking at tractors. And I'm a little bit concerned about that. Not so much about that because that probably does fall more in line with the agronomy-based type theme, but to Lori's point, there's a number of items on here that I would be afraid that it would open up the doors to commercial development in places that are being non-commercial areas within the village.
May I say, so I spoke with Andrew Bauckham, He's the director at the county, the Ag Center. I actually asked him if he can come in and speak. And I thought what we would discuss, it probably doesn't make sense for him to come in here during my application. Because what you guys are talking about now is overall rewriting the zoning table of uses versus my application. And he agreed. He thought it's probably best to bring him in, on an agenda item. And so I discussed with him a lot of what he does in the county. Did you know that, I didn't realize this, he told me that 18% of the employment in Union County is agriculture. They're the number one largest employer in Union County is agriculture. It's actually growing. And their whole thing is preserving open land. That's what it's not preserving agriculture. A lot of this is, and there's all these methods of doing it. And I explained to him what we're doing. He's really, a big fan of that, a big favor of that, for a lot of obvious reasons. And so maybe if you're talking about rezoning, or just looking at the RA40 zoning in itself, which would not only affect if I get rezoned on my property, but the other RA40 that we have, or any other application have coming in. Bring him in, let's have that discussion specifically for zoning, because he's going to be able to educate us on that a little more and tell us, what does a microbrewery look like? What does, I guess, tractors 50 feet from the back of your house look like? And he even said, he's like, one of the great things they don't like to do is they'll do a tour. So we can actually do a scheduled tour and go on a farm, and they can teach us these things. Because I don't know how many of us here have a nursery, have a brewery, have a vineyard, but it'd be nice maybe to go see those and really understand those before we say, let's take those out of our ordinance and basically limit agriculture potential in Wesley County. Does that make sense?
It does, and I do think that agriculture piece, like I said, the microbrewery to me is different from the vineyard, where you're growing the grapes and you're doing the wine, producing, aging, tasting kind of thing. That to me, I can see that. The microbrewery, I don't. Golf courses, schools, churches, those aren't open spaces. That it just seems in conflict to me, in particular.
Mike, you have any comments?
No comments. I think they've all been covered.
Like Laura said, it was when we did, we write something when we think it sounds good, and we're actually sitting down and looking at an application, we're like, hold on a second.
Well, for example, you could do an animal kennel on RA40, but not R60 or 80. And it would be kind of like you have much larger property, with R60 or R80, perhaps that you maybe an animal kennel might work there too. So I also have that other, is it broad enough in some of the other districts? Or applicability.
You can do everything you're doing right now in R40, right?
Right. I'm not in non-compliance with R40.
And I appreciate you wanting to do this to be a great example as we want to do this. I'm just not sure that this table of uses is the right one to go on.
I think about like in the fall when you go to somebody's farm and you have one of those massive undertakings of like hay rides and corn mazes and petting zoos
and those to me sound agricultural. They sound consistent with somebody making use of their land for these different ways. And yes, they're a temporary inconvenience and a temporary style commercial activity, but it's not the ongoing day-to-day activity for the year.
And maybe it's just that it's the unknown and it's scary because we've not ventured out into this before,
One core question for George. Is there any legal issues as John is our planning board director? Okay.
So are our options to deny John's request and then pursue the table of uses changes because if we approve his request, then it's consistent with this table of uses as it stands now?
Or is it consistently applies?
If it's approved, if you approve it tonight, then upon its approval, he would, the property owner would have the authority to apply for zoning approval for any of the uses that are permitted as use by right in that district.
As it stands.
As it stands right now.
At the time.
Yeah, and you could not place any kind of condition on it. You could theoretically defer the application and not make a decision on it tonight, and take some other action with regard to what's permitted in the RA 40 district, and then consider it at a later date. There are a range of options that you could. I'm not trying to lead you in one direction or the other, but if you wanted to reconsider it without him having to reapply, then you could do that. The applicant might also. It'd probably be good to hear from him if he wants a decision or not this evening as well.
As it is based on when he would apply, I would lean toward approving his application, but immediately turning around and reviewing the table of uses again. We've even talked about in the past making everything a conditional use. So we saw everything that comes to it, and it's funny, isn't it?
That's up to you.
I know it's more work for other people, but some of these things I think that are just a by right is a little concerning.
Most are by right.
Yeah.
If there are certain uses that you think might be more appropriate to have as a conditional use in the RA 40 district, then you can certainly make changes.
But that would be starting the whole process again.
So, what I heard you say is we could defer John's application for now, revisit the table of uses, and then reintroduce his application.
It would be.
Should he be amenable to that?
If the uses were diminished in their breadth, then the public hearing would have been conducted, I think, satisfying the requirement that people were notified a more expansive list of what could go on there. If the council then diminishes what can be done there, if it's expanded in any way, if the district allows more uses or doesn't require conditional use permit for certain things, or is more permissive, then we would have to start over, or at least re-advertise the public hearing. Yeah. The main issue is whether, if you're leaning towards if you were considering approving it with some changes, then the applicant has spent some money to this point, and we've spent some money to this point getting to where we are here. So it's just up to you, instead of having to start everything from scratch.
But even to edit some of these, we have to start the process over.
We would have to go through. No, not necessarily. As long as the resulting district is not more permissive.
So it could be less without.
Basically, I think basically what you're saying is in order to satisfy the notice to the public of what's happening, you can't start going in and messing substantively with each of those requirements other than to remove them.
Remove them. You can make things less permissive.
So if something's permitted on here, we say not anymore. That's okay, but I can't add any permitted use.
Right.
That's good.
Because we have to have another.
Any edits to the text of the ordinance will have to go to the planning board, but not the zoning map amendment.
Okay. Well, that's
It would not be common for this to occur, but it's permissible-ish.
We like to be different.
Yeah.
Council?
Sounds to me like the majority want to postpone. John, are you okay with this postponing the vote on this tonight?
I mean, if that's what you guys want. But I mean, again, the whole thing is.
I understand.
What?
I think there's a couple of questions that we're looking to maybe readdress before we make a final decision on this. And is it going to be a hardship for you if we do not move forward on this evening?
Remember this, the more we postpone, the more applications for subdivisions we're going to get.
I understand.
Big subdivisions, and more people are going to sell their property. And the message is, you don't have any other alternatives. That's it, sell your property for subdivision.
It's on the books now.
That's the message.
Right.
Well,
So
it is
we all
already-
voted, I mean, planning board was unanimous on zoning. You guys were unanimous on voting for it. Planning board was unanimous for this application, right? Trying to move forward with a positive message for that symbol right there. That's where we stand today. We want to pause and defer. It's not just me. I'm trying to do it, of course, for my family, but I have young kids. They can wait another month or two. But what's the message coming out of Wesley Chapel? Right? We've already been going down, I think, a good path to say there's an alternative for these large family plots. And when someone comes in and wants to subdivide and says, hey, I want to tear down a bunch of heritage trees, say, listen, we had another option. You could put in a golf course. You could put in one of these tables of uses. Are they going to come back and say, no, the only use you gave me was a nursery or a corn maze, and I'm just going to make $1.5 million off my property? I mean, you got to give and take.
But you also know nothing happens quickly in government.
We're not, well, okay.
Vaughn, is the planning board agenda for July light? Could they take a moment to review
There's nothing on it.
So
Yes.
on council request, could they take a moment to review the permitted use table and see if there's anything that,
I think we should have them give them a list of things that we're concerned about and let them consider those and see if they want to make a recommendation changing any of that.
Well, you want to go down the list and you raise your hand if you have a concern?
No, I think we've already talked about 2 or 3 of them, unless you have more.
There was a what?
In pink, if you want to know.
Well, what are yours?
Well, for, like I said, there were some things that were already 40, but not in our 60 or 80. I was like, maybe that would be acceptable for the other properties, but I won't even get into that. But the bed and breakfast was kind of like, okay, in theory, I've stayed in some of these, they're very small, they kind of fit in with the neighborhood kind of thing. It seems, okay, that's nice, everything else, but then it's like, okay, it's bed and breakfast, but how big is it and how much traffic? It's just a matter of quantification. Even the churches, the schools, the community center, and the golf course driving range, because that just sounds like you're going to take out trees. It sounds much more commercial, were the ones that stood out to me.
I just had the bed and breakfast and an animal kennel, if I right. I have a little issue with. I would rather see that one maybe like conditional. And then the microbrewery. I didn't particularly object to anything else. But to speak to the bed and breakfast, and working with some of the other municipalities, they are currently having issues with Airbnbs and the traffic and noise and some issues that are coming up in neighborhoods from places being rented out. So I just have a little heartburn about bread and breakfast. So what were your concerns?
The ones that are really more commercial in feel than anything else. Golf course, schools, that's commercial. Let's see if there's anything else commercially that I have an issue with. No, but then churches, community centers, and the schools. I guess that's primarily it.
Did you have any? So
Did you have a concern about zoos?
would that fall under the
Agricultural. Agricultural.
tourism?
Agritourism. There's petting zoos. That definition is inclusive of petting.
Farm animals only?
Right.
And that has a required acreage associated with it, right? So if you're gonna have a petting zoo, you can't have that on an acre. You have to have it on 5 acres.
So it's kind of like, should any agribusiness, agritourism be conditional? Well, when you have that distinction, right, it's like, yes, a nursery is great, a zoo of exotic animals, not so much.
So you think maybe making agribusiness and agritourism conditional use?
Unless we can make this more explicit and put it, I mean, I think these definitions are pretty good, but I had someone explain to me about a zoo, and it was like, oh yeah, it's like a native zoo, and I'm like, really, what kind of animals? I know it's lions and tigers and stuff, it's not native to North America.
John, you're not talking about the tigers out there.
No, he's not. And what he's proposing and how he looked at using, I am like,
I like to.
But now, if we're looking at the table of uses, think about all RA40, right? So off of Newtown Road, off of another applicant that may come in, who's got 30 acres, who wants to do something. So, I wouldn't look at what I'm doing, but look
no,
at
and that's the thing, it's like, it has to be applicable to everybody, and when you're in a broad area of large parcels, and they're all much more agricultural, it's very different than if you're in, or on the edge of something that's really purely residential. Like you said, Jim Parker Road is a little different from other parts of the village.
And you're making us try to be a little more proactive before there are a lot of applications. We always say we need to be more proactive than reactive, right? Somebody said that. So I don't have objections to what you're rezoning, but
I look at like the Greek church on Jim Parker Road, for instance, right? That's a big church with big events. If they are RA40, well, nobody has a problem. I don't know anybody that has a problem with that at all. But if they were RA40, they would be in compliance, right? Unless we take that out of here.
How are they not in compliance?
They have big events there.
So does Five Stones
Right.
and Siler.
They have a conditional use permit, right?
aren't they R40?
They probably should get a temporary use permit, but otherwise I don't think they're in
But when they
compliance.
do the event, they should get a temporary use permit.
Yeah.
Do they? So we either start.
I think they did once, but other than that, I don't know how many events they have.
I'm just going to give you one example, right? On Jim, there's lots of places that could be in compliance, and no one has a problem with what they're doing if they were RA40. So if someone has to keep doing what they've been doing, but no one has a problem with it, and we're going to tell them there's all this red tape, and you got to put in permits, etc., or you rezone RA40 and keep doing what you were doing to use by right. To me, that's trying to keep what we got, as opposed to them saying, you know what, forget the hassle, I'm going to make $1.5 million on some property. That's what we're seeing. I mean, every time we see an application come through, that's some landowner who's decided that's it, I'll sell it and move it out.
But us working through it now and maybe sending it to planning board in July and us to August, if that's, to me, that's not quick. That's not too much time to spend than dealing with issues that come later when stuff is approved and we haven't thought it out on paper.
I'm glad I hear that, because last time we discussed this, we said there wasn't enough time. We don't have time to review this anymore. So I'm glad to see we do have time now. It's good.
Wow, there was some, I'm not going to make a comment. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. So, I think what we're hearing from council is that there are some concerns about specific permitted uses, and that we would like to see in July, planning board go through this list and know that these are the ones that council has a little heartburn about. What do they think about making some of them conditional uses or removing them from the RA40 table of uses? Fair?
My understanding of what the more commercial types of uses are what you're concerned about versus more agricultural.
Yes. Yeah.
On the spectrum of uses.
Because we know that you give a developer a crack, and he's going to take the road. So, I mean, be very thoughtful in our, you give them a little bit, they're going to take a lot. So I'd rather try to be as clear as possible now before a problem comes later.
When you say developer, you mean like the Writing Academy that we saw earlier?
No, I just mean anyone who,
They start off with a little driving range, and then next thing you know, then they want to expand upon that and expand upon that.
well, we have developers who own land that they can do this with. So they could put in a bed and breakfast and some things that might give us some heartburn.
Or they could build one house per acre and make 10 times that much.
Yeah. And we've seen a little bit of everything. So the question is, does John's application get approved or deferred?
Polling council?
Yes.
I like deferred more than anything else.
I would say defer until we get some clarification on the permitted uses.
Do we need to identify the amount of time, like 90 days?
I think just taking no action on it
Is it
now
deferred in itself?
probably be considered, you have not come to a conclusion yet, and so nobody's made a motion to approve or deny it. I think it has an expectation of having a decision in a reasonable amount of time, but
And John, I would say that I will ask the planning board to have a decision, and if planning board reviews this in July, I'll ask council to have a review in August, and then a decision on your application in August. Is that fair?
I'll have to excuse myself from all those discussions
Yeah.
because it's deferred.
We'll have to pass together. So think about that, who you're going to pass it to.
Well, I mean,
Oh, he has a chair.
There's a vice chair.
yeah.
Is that legal, George? William?
It is. Vaughn and I were just talking about whether or not it makes sense to, for any reason, to continue the hearing in addition to not taking any action tonight. And I don't know that. I guess it's ultimately whether or not you would have.
I think we've talked it to death.
I think you've talked. It's certainly an option. So, but what Vaughn is suggesting, it passes muster in that you're taking no action. The application still exists. It hasn't been approved or denied. Therefore, it can be revisited at a future meeting.
it's old business.
Yeah.
At the point
Old
in time,
business, right.
Point in time, we decide to take it back up.
So we'll put on our August agenda, to review planning board's findings and recommendations about updating the table of uses. And then after that, we'll put John's application under that.
Now, would they not have to call for a public hearing because you're amending the zoning
For the
ordinance?
text of the ordinance will have to be a public hearing.
But this wouldn't have to be.
No, but I mean, they can't change
It would-
the underlying zoning.
It was up to them what at the timing of the change. You know, you could
If you approve the rezoning, you still have your current list.
right then yeah.
To change that underlying list, you have to call for a public hearing.
So September would be
Yeah.
the meeting at which you could do the text amendment and then
Right.
the
Okay.
rezoning, and then
Right.
the new regulations would be in place in effect if the rezoning is approved.
Okay.
Which means we do have to have the planning board do it in July for us to review in August to put it on the calendar for September.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Tom?
It's not my decision. I mean,
Well, you can, I mean, you
I
can
could be
withdraw
or
your
not. I
application.
mean, it doesn't make a difference, does it?
The other thing I'd like to add is normally I go to planning board meetings. David normally does, maybe with Amanda. But if David and Lori seem to have the biggest amount of input, I'd be willing to step back and let them step in without those particular meetings.
I could not go to the July meeting.
And
So.
I'll be glad to know if I see it, if you guys want to go. Okay. Because we get our quorum of council at that meeting. But if you'd like to be in attendance.
I'll be at the oversight meeting the following night, so I prefer to limit my meetings to one night a week.
Well, I think you should go out of your way to specifically write down your concerns and get those either through Vaughn or through Cheryl, so that those specific items get discussed.
Yeah, if anybody wants to send me anything that would help to instruct the planning board on the council's intent, that would be very helpful.
So everybody said Vaughn and Cheryl and Mel. It's all for us down here.
Well, remember, I'm going to have to excuse myself from that discussion, so anybody else with land that, or understand what farm uses and agriculture uses, will have to step up in the planning board to help adjust the table of uses.
You have to recuse yourself from the ordinance discussion because you have.
No, he doesn't need to.
Yeah, I think we're not discussing your specific application, so you.
Are you sure?
You're a lawyer.
You're fine. This is
Yeah, no, I mean,
everybody in town.
it's a discussion just like any other section of the ordinance to be amended. I mean, your application happens to be kind of sitting there parallel with it, but it's a discussion about a generally applicable
As long as
ordinance.
you're okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay. Never mind.
John, you know, we'd like
I feel much better now. It's like, how can you not be part of this?
I opened the door and then I got closed out.
That's what I felt like. All right.
John, can
Good.
appreciate and value your opinion.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right, so we appreciate it, John. So we'll just continue that. Cheryl, we'll put John's consideration of this application on our September meeting after hopefully a public hearing. And we will not drag our feet. Okay.
Planning board line.
No.
I mean, honestly, I'm a fan of seeing if we can go do one of these tours with the director of the agriculture. I mean, we need to educate a little better. I mean, if what we pass, no one understands it or knows it or doesn't feel good about it, then we probably need to be educated better, and that might be something that we're going to do in the planning board.
The tour will be there, though, not here.
Oh, right, we have to go to the farm. I mean, I'm just giving you an example of one.
Set one up and invite everyone.
That would have to be a special meeting
Right.
of both bodies.
I mean, that's what you do if you have to revisit an ordinance again, 6 months later. Is, why are we doing this? Apparently we weren't educated enough the first time. Let's get educated the next time. The council brings it back to us.
Sure.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. All right, so that brings us down to number 11. Does anybody have anything further before we go? Okay, so number 11 is the Western Union Municipal Update. We did not meet in June due to various reasons. We are meeting in July, and we will be having a presentation from the Union County Library Foundation about the proposed new branch of the library down near Cuthbertson. And then we were also going to be discussing some of those. Weddington specifically is having issues with Airbnbs and noise ordinance violations. But that's really all the update for that. Number 13, the update on the American Rescue Plan Act. We do need to pass this ordinance for us to be allowed to have funds. We did receive definite guidance that we will receive no more than 75% of, what was the figure?
$743,501, which would be $557,625. And I don't know if that's a max.
We don't know if we'll get
Or,
$10 or.
Right.
We have no idea, but we're not getting $10 million. So it's not true gossip. We still, once we see how much money we're eligible for, then council will really need to sit down and look at the acceptable uses for the funds. Cheryl did say that we have 5 years to do the.
They've stressed a couple things, being very cautious about what you spend, because if you spend something that you shouldn't spend it on, you'll have to repay it. They've said you have 5 years, don't jump and do this. They've stressed that a lot of things should be a regional cooperation, and I see the COGS getting very involved. So you may be well asked from Union County Water and Sewer Authority to provide some money. I don't know. But these are the kinds of things I'm hearing. The money has not come out yet. I feel like they're getting closer, but we're only going to get half of whatever we get. The other thing is there's a category where if if our revenues were hurt, and there's calculations to use to do that, and you can do that every year for 4 years. For the first year, we were not hurt in revenue. Those monies have a little more flexibility in what you can spend it for, but we don't qualify for the first year, and I sorted out we'll qualify for any year.
Cheryl, how firm is the list of what we can and cannot use the funds for?
Pardon?
How firm is the list of what we can and cannot use the funds for?
There's a U.S. Treasury ruling. It's very specific, and I think you're going to probably want a George approval, as well as the NC Pro is also telling people whether they can or can't do something. I think you probably want both.
Because my understanding was kind of like what we were doing with, hey, here's your ordinance saying we're open to take these funds to the max that we can and apply them and putting them in the right financial oversight and protocols and whatever, but we don't have to decide what to do with the money.
Right.
We're just setting up the framework to get them.
The ordinance that I'm asking for your approval tonight is one that the North Carolina School of Government came up with. It's pretty much a cut and paste, and it talks about in Section 1 the funds may be used for the following categories of expenditures.
So I would like to make a motion that we adopt NC Grant Project Ordinance 2021-10 for Coronavirus State Local Fiscal Recovery Fund.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
I would caution, though, that if the municipalities are getting X, the county is getting 10, 20 times that. So if they want to turn around and put the burden on our shoulders when they've gotten the lion's share of the funds, we need to be careful of that. But that,
Cooperation.
well, exactly. I don't want them to say, hey, how much you guys going to throw in the kitty? Like, you guys got the biggest pot. So, be weary of that.
The one other small thing is, I put in the dollar amount I put in was $500,000, and it's truly a guess. And I asked them, should we get the money first and then do a resolution, or should we do a resolution first? And they said, just do a resolution and just estimate it, and then just adjust it when you get the exact amount.
So stay tuned. All right. So, any further questions? Oh, we did it all in favor here. We did. Okay, so that leads us to council comment.
Discussing the reappointment to the Board of Adjustments.
That one, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Dave?
Yeah, my only question was, there was one member who has been super active in Chelsea Chapel, that decided not to be reappointed. Is there any reason given other than just life?
I think we've had a variance, and we've had what was the other thing?
Appeal.
An appeal. And I think the person that chose not to be reappointed was more sympathetic. Some people have a little harder time separating their emotional side from applying the laws.
Understood. Thank you.
On an off random side note, I do have a picture of what became of the Blackstone variance. If anyone's interested. Very interesting. Girl. Yep. So council comments.
So we need
Oh, we got to reappoint them. So
yeah, the council would need to do that.
I'll make a motion that we reappoint Henry C. Butch Byron Jr. and Kieran as regular members to the Board of Adjustment.
Second.
all in favor? How many? So that leaves us now with how many openings on the Board of Adjustment?
I think it's not too bad. I think there's one. I'll have to check it. There's supposed to be 5 regular and 2 alternate. We moved an alternate up, so we may have a regular and an alternate opening now.
So now all that moves us to council comments. Who would like to go first?
I'll go. glad that we're looking into this noise ordinance, schools versus churches. I think that's important. Well, it's not really related to this, but you know, I'm going to reserve a comment on that until next month. So.
I'll go next. We've received a lot of complaints over the past month about gunfire along Jim Parker Road.
No.
Underwood Road. Sorry, John. Along Underwood Road.
Gun range.
Gunfire along Underwood Road. Similar to the noise ordinance. We do have a gunfire ordinance. Underwood Road is in Westwood Chapel. It's not an incorporated Union County. So we've done some education with our deputies. We have informed residents who live along Underwood Road that we do have a gunfire ordinance and what specifically that is. We've asked our deputy to visit one of the parcels in question to make sure that they're aware of the ordinance. We are continuing to get complaints. So I just want to stress to council, staff, and the community that the gunfire ordinance is not something that the people up here can enforce. So when you do hear gunfire, you are to immediately call 911 and report it to the sheriff's office. This person needs to be caught in the act before civil citations can commence. So if there is gunfire in your neighborhood or you hear residents complaining, just please advise them to immediately call 911. They can ask for a report number. They can email me or Cheryl, so we can also forward the complaint on to the deputy. But I think that the problem is going to have to, I think there are going to have to be a lot of calls so the person can be caught in the act and so the sheriff's department can do something about it. So just if you have any complaints and hear people talking about it, they must call 911 immediately. Yes, ma'am.
I would just say make sure before you do that to educate yourself on the ordinance, because there are allowable shooting is allowed in Westwood Chapel under certain circumstances, correct?
Yes, and the neighborhoods that border this road are aware of the ordinance, and there are definitely violations occurring.
I'm just saying in general. If you hear gunfire, don't just call 911. Make sure that they're.
Well, you can call 911 and they will go out and make sure that the
that's
ordinance is not being violated. I wouldn't suggest that a resident go out and try to figure out if the boundaries are properly marked and if it's so many feet from a residence or a common entrance bay. I would still call 911 and let a deputy make that determination if you have a complaint. So we're working on that too. So lots of complaints as well. Next.
Lori, I'll go. George, I've got a quote that has been dying to use from Thomas Shelby, Birmingham, England. You can change what you do, but you can't change what you want. I think I would like to challenge council for us to change what we're doing on a couple of things. The talk in the produce aisle of Westwood Chapel and the talk on Potter's Road South, whenever we cross the road to talk to our neighbors, is always roads and always what's going on right here at the shopping center. I know there's not anything that we can do about the roads, but I feel like that we can communicate a little bit better to the citizens about what's going on, what's planned, just what's on the agenda, what we can do, what we can't do, what's expected of the roads. I'd like for us to, in some way, be it through the communications committee or other means, to let the residents know, hey, we can't do a lot, but this is what's on the books. And the second thing, I know that we have economic development subcommittee that was part of the comp plan subcommittees. I'd also like us to consider putting something in place that we can be the greasy wheel with Aston Properties. I've been so many times I've wanted to take the exit out of PetSmart and ride down the path there that seems to be getting a lot of use to see what it's going to. But I've been afraid to, because I'm afraid that someone may see me and they may want to do the same thing, so I'm trying to time that just right. I don't know where the path's going to, I don't know what's going on back there, but I know that there's, the grass doesn't get worn down if there's not traffic going back there, and there's traffic going back there. So, again, those are the two topics that I continue to hear. What can we do about the roads, and what can we do about this, this half-finished shopping center? And Thomas Shelby's point, we can't change what we want, but we can change what we do, and that is maybe communicate better and maybe a little bit louder in some terms.
I want to communicate with the audience. DOT has, from Blackstone to Bonner, is under contract officially for resurfacing, for rehabilitation and resurfacing. The contract runs from June to May, I guess, but DOT is hoping that that will happen sooner than later, but they can't guarantee or require when your contractor does that rehabilitation and resurfacing. But it is actually a signed contract, so hopefully some of those potholes will be gone.
I just want to, say that the park event in June that we had, we did not have the Friends of Park and Rec, who have been primary partners with us for several years and helped with so much. And we did not have them, and the Parks and Rec Committee pulled off a very successful event. And so I think that's great. That was one of those things we wanted to see, is that the committee could carry that forward without that extra resource. We have opportunities to improve or address some things, to get some more volunteers and engagement, but I think that right there was a big thing. It is very unfortunate, the limited number of cars that donated. That was just very disappointing. But that's not a reflection of the committee. But I do think, congratulations on a job well done, and especially being able to show that it can be self-sufficient without the Friends of Park and Rec. That was a big problem.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you for coming.